you can and will know in advance that there are some customers that are going to convert at 40 or 50 or 60%, and you can know that in advance. And there are others that are going to convert at something very close to 0%.
Welcome back to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm your host, Egan Heath. I'm the owner of Caravan Digital. We're a direct-to-consumer e-commerce agency. And today I'm speaking with Richard Harris. He's from Black Crow A.I. Richard, welcome.
It's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Richard, tell us a little bit about what you guys do and what AI can do for Shopify store owners.
Sure. So obviously AI is getting a lot of attention in the market right now. And to begin with, we're not generative AI. We don't make funny pictures or write copy for you, although those can be quite helpful. We're very focused on helping brands make sense of all the data that they own, whether they are aware that they own all of this data or not. And so we're a machine learning company built to bring the power of AI, the same kind of AI that Fortune 500 brands use, to companies of any size, especially the middle of the market and smaller end of the market. And we work with e-commerce companies. So as an example, we drive predictions that enable you to understand the future value of 100% of your site visitors the moment they arrive and all through their journey with your brand.
Yeah, that's great. We've talked with some guests who've talked about zero party and first party data. Can you give us an example of some of the data that your system is drawing from?
Sure. So it's only first and zero party data. So we don't use any external data sources. But what's very interesting about Black Crow is we solved a bunch of technical problems, very tough and not widely solved technical problems about real-time machine learning, meaning that we can ingest massive amounts of data in real time. For instance, the event data that's kicked off by users interacting with your brand, interacting with your digital property, your website. And we can make sense of that hyper fast. And so the kinds of data that we use are those real-time browsing, shopping events that for the most part may not even be logged, but certainly are not used or processed or made sense of by most brands, simply because there is so much data. Think about, where a user came from, all of the parameters of that sort of initial arrival, and then all of their behavior in session. So the way they're moving through your purchase funnel, how fast, how deeply are they scrolling? Are they looking at images, lingering on images, refining their searches, coming back over time, looking at the same products, different products. So there's all of this very, very rich real-time information. There's just so much of it that it's not really human processable. And so you need a machine to take care of that and make sense of it. And that's what we're especially good at, is taking all of that rich streaming real-time data, making sense of it, and being able to predict the most important KPIs for e-commerce companies. For instance, is this person going to buy? What is their future value?
And what sorts of action, might your customers or clients take then based on the data that your system can help them, analyze and figure out?
Sure. So there's some very foundational things, and then there's some very specialized things. So at the base, we're all about first party data, meaning only the data that the brand owns. And so in order to make sure that you're actually getting your first party data house in order, there's some foundational infrastructure around things like, can you actually recognize your users? And I think everyone is very, very aware of the platform wars going on as Tim Cook tries to punch Mark Zuckerberg in the face, every other week. And Apple's moves in the name of privacy, and we can talk about that if you want, but this is not about privacy. This is about Apple. But it's impacted brands' foundational ability to recognize their own users, and users that have willingly given, their email address or their SMS, they're signed up for SMS or have purchased in the past. It's blocking the ability for brands to recognize their users. Now, we fix that for brands at the very foundational level, so that now you can understand a full customer journey. Now you can initiate an email sequence for a user that appears anonymous to you, but actually, you just haven't been able to tell that you know them. So there's that very foundational stuff. Once that is in place, then you can start doing the higher order and very interesting machine learning applications. And so if you picture, and I'm happy to show a graph of this, but if you just realize, if you ask a brand what their conversion rate is, they'll often tell you maybe it's 2%, 6%, whatever it is. In fact, there's no 6% conversion rate users, right? In the end, everyone either buys or doesn't buy. But there are populations that are likely to convert at 70% and some that will convert at 0.002%. And if you could know in advance who is who, and you didn't have to think about everyone on average, there's a lot of things you would do differently. Marketing is a big one, merchandising, promotions, really anywhere where you would want to differentiate the experience based on this knowledge of a user's future value and behavior. You're now able to do that in real time before the next page loads if you want to.
It's interesting about you don't even know that they've been on your site or opted in before. Are you helping, your customers stitch together, hey, someone visited from iPhone, someone, came back to the page on iMac? Is that something where you can help with cross-device tracking?
Yeah, so we don't do the tracking ourselves, but we do have a component of our platform, which is user recognition infrastructure. So it's a piece of infra that actually sits on the server side of the brand, and it's sort of a permanent identifier that lets them understand their users, certainly their known users when they're coming back, but also stitch together sessions of unknown users as well.
And as we record this here in April 2023, Richard, a lot of our clients are kind of making the switch or learning how to use Google Analytics 4. Yes. And that's really an event-based platform. Sounds like your system as well at Black Crow A.I is really looking at events. It sounds like you guys get even more granular than what GA4 is looking at. But that's always sort of the question of what do we do with this data? It sounds like part of what you do is you're helping make that data actionable. And maybe an example would be Klaviyo is going to have a dynamic segment here where we didn't have that kind of browsing data. We didn't have that granularity, and now we do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so again, we're focused on not AI because it sounds cool, on the hyper practical ways that actually deploying machine learning, and it only takes literally one click to have a Fortune 500 grade ML system running for your brand, no matter how small you are. We're focused on activating those predictions in the most practical ways. And so if you think about predictions or sort of user recognition. So if you think about the fact that someone comes to your site, you think they're an anonymous user. Step one is actually, are they anonymous or do I know them? And so using our user recognition infrastructure, you can now know, oh, actually, this is someone who has been here before. They haven't purchased, but they've signed up for my, SMS notifications and offers. That simple fact means if they then add something to cart and abandon, you could remind them about it later when normally you wouldn't have been able to. And now further, if you know that this is a user I know before, and we've delivered a prediction about how likely they are to convert in the next, 6 months or 2 weeks or 5 minutes, you may want to send them or not send them an offer or a discount or a promotion that you're currently running. And being able to segment your users by their future value enables you to customize what your communications are, as well as deliver the communication itself.
And in terms of the machine learning, is the data just coming from, the Shopify site that I hook up to your system, or is it also leveraging data, that the system has learned from all these other e-commerce sites too?
Yeah, no, we're super strict fundamentalists on first-party data. So the predictions and the user recognition infrastructure relies only on the data from your specific brand. Nothing else comes in or out.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Because most people think, oh, if I'm a relatively small, like I'm not even Shopify Plus, I'm a relatively small store. I got a couple million of revenue. I need more scale. I need to join a data co-op, or I need to be exchanging my data to get enough signal. Well, when I talked about real time earlier and the fact that what we do is not a widely solved problem, it turns out if you can use all of the user event data, meaning everything that a user is doing inside of their session and their interactions with you, there is plenty of data there to make very, very accurate predictions. You just have to put it to use. And that's what machine learning does. And real-time machine learning enables you to take all of that event data and create very accurate predictions.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a certain, traffic amount, certain revenue number people should be at when in order to start looking at machine learning like this?
Yeah, I mean, so for us right now, we tend to work with Shopify Plus, like a few million or more. That's less about whether it's technically capable, but for us, just an efficiency tool, right? As we get out there and deliver these solutions, we want to make sure that the dollar value to the user is enough to support a reasonable subscription price. But there's very few, once you're above, say, 100,000 visitors, you can produce a very accurate prediction.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I know you had a visual you wanted to pull up. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. Let me pull that up right here. So this is sort of one of the very first and foundational predictions that we released at Black Crow. Again, this is all done in real time, but just to explain, and then we can talk about how you might apply this, how this is actually hyper practical. So if you think about along the x-axis, this is sort of all of your site visitors, right? You could think about them in deciles. And then along the y-axis is the value of those site visitors. So you could think about that as their conversion rate, their actual conversion rate. As I mentioned earlier, if you think about the site visitors deciles, but then you ask any brand sort of what's your conversion rate, they'll usually have a number for you, right? My conversion rate is 2% or 6% in this example. And what that sort of assumes is that if you think about your traffic in deciles and sort of 10% buckets, that each of those buckets of traffic is composed of a random jumble of users, all of whom average out to converting at 6%. And I think intuitively, we all know that that isn't the case, right? But it's really been impossible to tell who's going to buy and who's not going to buy, in advance. And so what we do at Black Crow is we sort of de-average that 6% conversion rate. And so now, because we're predicting the future value, the likelihood to buy or subscribe in real time, instead of thinking about each of these buckets of users, each of these deciles of being average value, meaning likely to convert, we can actually predict the value of every single user and put every single user in one of these buckets that's now no longer about their average value, but about their de-averaged or future value. And we see it's a very, very different story. So that 6% line doesn't exist, right? It's not actually a line. It's a curve, right? And you can and will know in advance that there are some customers that are going to convert at 40 or 50 or 60%, and you can know that in advance. And there are others that are going to convert at something very close to 0%, right? And again, this is all knowable seconds, minutes, weeks, months in advance. And so we just push this back to all of our brands in real time and tell you who's who. Is this particular person shopping right now in the lowest bucket, the highest bucket, or something in between? And then if you just think for a second, like, okay, if I know that one of my shoppers on my site right now is in this bucket versus in this bucket, is there anything I would want to do differently? And of course there is. And one of the big ones is sort of marketing related activities. So do I want to advertise to this person on Meta in the future? Do I want to send them a discount SMS, or am I pretty sure they're going to buy? Maybe I don't need the biggest discount. And for this person, maybe I don't want to spend on them in the future at all because they're just so unlikely to convert. And I should focus only on email marketing if I have their address. So all of these sorts of decisions, when you sort of de-average your user base, you can also de-average the kinds of decisions you make about how to spend. And the end result, if you just take an example of Meta, for example, when you can eliminate spend on a bunch of users here and make sure you're getting in front of these high value users, that can produce a ROAS increase of sort of 20 to 50%.
Wow, that's phenomenal. I was going to ask, I know Meta and Google both have obviously AI working in their algorithms and what they're doing. and in their systems. And it's almost like a handoff there in terms
That's
of
right.
what you guys are doing of, hey, maybe here's a custom audience. Here's some particular Facebook pixel events. We're going to pass that into Meta. Meta's going to maybe find us a lookalike audience or find us other people like that. It may be simple demographics, I'm guessing, or it could be other sorts of things that go beyond, demographic information. It's more behavioral information. Am I thinking about that the right way?
Yeah, so we don't look at demographics at all. We're
Wow.
using just the signals, like the
Hmm.
behavioral, in session event signals about a user's own
Hmm.
activity that are indicative, right? Our machine finds the patterns in the data. We build a bespoke model for every single brand that says, hey, people displaying this kinds of behavior tend to convert at this kind of rate versus other kinds of behavior at other rates. So when we pass in a segment to TikTok or Meta and we say, hey, these are users who are very likely to convert, Meta will do their hocus pocus and say, okay, I know a lot of these people already. I know their, interest profile or demographics or locate, and they'll figure out what the elements of it are. And in the case of the sort of more fundamental user recognition infrastructure that I mentioned earlier, so that ability, that persistent identifier that we enable brands to create, that's another great thing to feed into the platforms like Meta, right? So when you understand who this user is, it enables the platforms to link together. Oh, this person saw this ad, 30 days ago, and now I see them converting, and it gives much better data to say Facebook's algorithms, so that you're not training it on wrong data. Like this is an anonymous user. I've never seen them before. They have no interaction history with me, no ad history on Instagram or whatever. Now we're able to stitch more of that together, and then the brand can feed that to Meta, so it trains its models much more effectively.
Hmm. It sounds like we could, if I'm understanding you right, we could get outside the tyranny of 7-day click attribution. If it's a longer sales cycle, potentially we could close the loop even past the 1 month mark. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is really a
Hmm.
sort of I don't want to say perpetuity, but it is, because
Hmm.
it's set by the brand by the domain owner, which is something that Apple wants brands to be able to do. This is sort of working
Hmm.
within the privacy and data structures that Apple is dictating to us. But yeah, this lasts as close to infinitely as is possible. So yeah, it's not subject to the 24-hour and 7-day, third party cookie expiration, or even what's been called first party cookies, but that are set by third party vendors. This is a true piece of infrastructure that's an identifier set by the brand or domain owner.
I know one of the big questions that comes up in AI is it a black box? Can we ask it what it did and how it came up with this? I'm curious, how you talk about that. And maybe it's a moot point. Maybe it doesn't matter if we just here's a list, Meta, like give us more people like this. But I'm curious, is the system able to say that top decile of buyers, here's what they did and here's why they're in that top decile?
Yeah, so we don't focus too much on the explainability. You mentioned GA4 earlier. We push our data anywhere, so you can push them into a variety of places like a CDP or an analytics tool, and that will deliver some demographic or behavioral or psychographic information about these sort of segments of users. But it's not something we focus on. We just want to get people the answers as fast as possible. Is this person going to buy? Are they a high future value person I really need to focus on?
Mm-hmm. And the system is learning, I assume, based on you know other people browsing the site or previous users of the site. Basically, the people who purchased, they engaged in these events, they did these actions on the sites. We can sort of retroactively say, when someone does this, when they look at this picture, when they look at this carousel, that increases their odds of converting X%. And that's kind of where that analysis is coming from. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, so I'll just walk you through the basics of how the
Mm-hmm.
machine learns.
Yeah.
So if you're, for example, a Shopify store, you download the Black Crow app. That's all you need to do. About 10 days later, now when that app is downloaded, that enables the machine to start listening to all the user event data, right? So it starts looking at, and if you say it's a subscription company, and the real objective function is, or the key thing in their business is, does this person subscribe or not? So over the next 10 days, the machine listens to all of that event data, all those sort of the click stream, the behavioral, the return patterns, et cetera. And it starts to find patterns in the data. Again, there's no human involvement in this process. The machine is just doing it. And once that model reaches a certain level of accuracy, it sort of self-publishes. And at that point, it can score every user by how likely they are to complete that action, that subscription. And it's really just training itself on that data. And then once the model is published, every single day, the machine wakes up in the middle of the night and rebuilds that model as though it hadn't existed, because customer behavior changes over time, or maybe you're running a promotion, or maybe it's, Black Friday or whatever it is. As that consumer behavior changes, you need to change the model, or the machine needs to change its understanding of what signals are predictive. And so, in a given user action, like someone clicks on something, there's 400 to 500 different signals that the machine is listening to, processing, and then in order to create that prediction in 10 milliseconds.
That's part of what I was going to ask. Let's say I'm a user, I visit the site, I click from an Instagram ad, I browse around a few pages, I look at a few products, and I leave. How many data points is that? How many events was that?
Yeah, so it will be, if it was 5 pages, it'll be about 2,500 different features, different events. And if you think about it, because we build a custom model for every single brand that we work with, what it's figuring out is sort of, there's a limited number of data points on any given page. Say it's 500. Those are relatively, what those 500 signals are on any given user action, those are relatively common or standard across multiple brands. So we know the universe of data available. What the machine is trying to figure out is, what weighting should I assign to each variable, each of those 500 things for this brand? How important is that, right? And it might be zero importance, or it might be like really freaking important. And it sort of gives a coefficient or a weighting to each of those variables. And then it sort of learns like, hey, if I put this weighting here, does that make the sort of algorithm work? And does it work today and tomorrow, or do I need to change it tomorrow? So that's that sort of learning process.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the reason I asked too about the supposed black box of it is I'm always getting to, and then what do we do with it? And it sounds like we could have better Klaviyo flows. We could have better text message flows. Maybe our pop-ups and opt-ins change.
Yes.
And potentially our meta audiences become different. And am I thinking of the right things, that because of what your system does, I'm now making different marketing decisions?
Exactly right. So if you think about it, we push that prediction back to the page, or in the case of our user recognition, we push that sort of identity, who this user is, back to you. And now that enables you to make very different decisions, right? And so if you remember back to that graph I was showing you, if you want to say, hey, those bottom 3 deciles of users, there's just very little transaction value embedded in them. And so if I see those people again on Instagram, I'm willing to pay nothing or very close to nothing. So I don't want to focus a lot of dollars there. I probably want to repurpose those dollars to people where I think there's a lot of future transaction value embedded. On the sort of user recognition side, right? If you're, owned marketing has become, I think, even more of a focus, as there's been so much turbulence in the sort of paid acquisition channels. So if you use Klaviyo, you want to make sure that if someone adds something to cart and then abandons, or initiates a checkout and abandons, or even browses, you want to make sure that you can leverage your most high value email cadences, email flows, to the maximum number of people possible. And if your ability to recognize users is just disappearing after 24 hours or 7 days, you need to restore that, because the marginal cost of sending an email is so low. And if you can engage users, especially high value users, at the right moment with the right message, you want to get as many of those transactions under your belt as you can.
Love it. It sounds like this is automated Pareto principle 80-20 analysis for your e-commerce store.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, it's very sort of low touch. As I mentioned, it's one click to get started. But we have a whole team of success folks who can guide you through any element of it. But then once it's on, it's just continuing to deliver, to help you recognize users and deliver these predictions about them, so you can just take much more intelligent marketing actions.
That sounds phenomenal, Richard. Since I have you here, and you're an expert in this piece, can I ask you broadly about, machine learning and AI and where things are going here?
Well, that is certainly a big question. So people who are much smarter than me are saying that we need to pause AI before we have a mass extinction event of humanity. I'm probably a little more optimistic, although it's the sort of public facing releases of machine learning or of AI, particularly in the generative space. Like there's a few different disciplines. There's like predictive, generative, there's a few, computer vision. There's a few different disciplines within AI, and the generative has really sort of captured people's imaginations, these sort of large language models that Chat GPT is an example of, because they mimic our behaviors, our language, our thinking so closely. But today that is all they're doing. They're mimicking based on very large data sets. So there's no, as much as it might seem like it, there's no real consciousness or self-awareness happening in these machines. But I do think, there are dangers with AI. If we create artificial general intelligence, meaning something that has the same sort of intellectual capacity as a human brain, once you're there, it will accelerate to superhuman intelligence very, very quickly. And then it's very easy to see that we lose control over these things.
Pretty amazing to think about, isn't it? I listened to Nick Bostrom's Super Intelligence, yes. And I recommend some of his videos and things if people are interested in this. I'm thinking even short of AGI and the utopian or dystopian visions, I'm thinking even just for marketers like us, for people who are in-house or agency owners, how do you see the field changing in terms of, what are the humans going to do? What's the AI going to do? Obviously, you're implementing this in the industry, but what do our jobs as marketers look like in 5 to 10 years, and where should we be focusing?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you see across a variety of use cases with AI is that you can think of this as a good thing or a bad thing, but it enables us to elevate the sort of set of tasks and responsibilities that we as humans do. And so, just thinking, we use, AI to generate copy that we test in our own sort of marketing and communications. We use it for visuals on our website. And though that sort of process, think about even just very recently, a designer having to create something in Photoshop, and then our head of marketing looks at 7 different examples of it and says, oh, can you adjust this? Can you adjust that? That whole series of things, I don't know how long that would have been, but hours over a week, say, that can be reduced. That cycle time can be reduced to a few seconds. And so I think all of these sort of generative tools are enabling us to really get a little more conceptual, right? Which is like being able to sort of conceptualize what kind of output I'm looking for, and being able to sort of articulate that becomes the game, right? That becomes what a marketer is doing. The execution of the details, you can just not be too precious about a designer's time anymore, because you can generate infinite variations of this hyper quickly. So I think it's going to enable us to just sort of elevate the set of things that we focus our time on, to really be creative and thoughtful about the higher order goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a hopeful vision, right? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of more junior or entry level positions that would have been, one's entree into the world of design or copywriting or marketing. Those things, those entry level sort of functions may be done by machines. I mean, I think it's already happening very, very quickly. And same with analysis. Marketing, especially e-commerce marketing, has become such an analytical trade, right? Which is, there's a few people working on brand and image and community, but then it's like, if I spend this much money or send this many emails, tell me what the conversion rate and the open rate is going to be and how much money am I going to make. And that sort of analysis role, which has normally been like business intelligence or data analysis within marketing, machines are very, very good at that kind of thing. And, stuff we're doing about predictions takes a lot of that role. So we don't want to be the enemy of the analyst. We want to be their superpower. But a lot of that, just the capabilities of an analyst inside of an organization is going to be vastly multiplied.
Yeah, that sounds spot on. Thank you for talking about that. I mean,
Sure.
you and I were chatting beforehand, and I know we both kind of have liberal arts backgrounds. I wonder if you could talk a bit about, your journey from there to this very technical field, and even just any advice you have to share. If AI is going to be the future here for for so many people and what they do professionally and otherwise, how does someone who's not technical, get into this? And in your case, you're founder and CEO of an AI company. I'm just curious about that journey and, what you recommend to other people that are interested in this.
Sure. So first of all, I'm a co-founder, and
All right.
one of my co-founders, Shazad. Anyway, I've got a bunch of people who I work with who actually know the science here. The data science, the ML, the data pipelining, ML operations. You have this title, but you can't really do anything alone, or it's very hard to. And so, when I was young, I did some programming and a lot of math, but I don't understand how to create an ML system. And that's why I'm lucky to have extremely talented people that I work with. But yeah, my background is, as you mentioned, is in liberal arts. Studied a lot of philosophy and political theory, like you. And I think the one thing I'm grateful for that is it gives you critical thinking tools, and being able to approach a data set, whether that is a book or a theory or a philosopher's work or a bunch of data about a product, and being able to sort of critically examine it. So, take those data points in and try to come up with hypotheses about what reality is. That's sort of the job, I think, of a founder, which is like, I'm getting all this data. Do I believe that the thing I'm doing is going to solve it? Is the data telling me that? Is the problem the right problem? And so that sort of rigorous liberal arts training, even though it sounds artsy, is very, very valuable as a founder.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for talking about that. One thing
Sure.
I sort of took away from Nick Bostrom's work and thinking about the AGI stuff was I understand that the artificial intelligence is just going to go so far beyond us of here's how we do things. But in terms of here's how we select what to do, here's the vision, here's the goal, I'm not clear on how it gets to that. And so just as a side comment about that.
Yeah, no, it's very mysterious. I mean, I think, consciousness is sort of the hardest problem. Like, it's up there with where did the universe come from?
Yeah.
Understanding what consciousness is still an utter mystery. We don't know what it is. We don't know when it awakens. There are people who think consciousness is embedded in the universe. So, in the same way that matter has, subatomic particles, there are people who think consciousness exists down to the atomic or subatomic level. And that sounds crazy, that there's some amount of consciousness in a rock. But there's pretty serious people who are sort of treading this path. So we don't know. But in the absence of really understanding consciousness, it's very hard to know, can a machine wake up, right? Is there a certain density of processing power that just awakens? We just have literally no idea. Which
That's
is crazy
wonderful.
to think about, that we have no idea.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that's the kind of mind-blowing stuff I love to think and talk about. But
Me too.
maybe for today, maybe we should leave it in a more practical place. Richard, who's a good fit for you guys, and where can they find you and learn more?
Yeah, so you can always go to blackcrow.ai. Good fit, e-commerce store. Most of our customers are on Shopify. we like to say sort of at the low end, 2 to 5 million of GMV, up to about 500 million or a billion of GMV. That's sort of our sweet spot. And we make everything sort of fast, cheap, and easy, right? It's easy to install, a breeze to manage, and will cost you much less than really any other way of getting access to high powered data science.
Love it. Richard Harris, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what's working in e-commerce.
Thank you for having me. It's been a really fun conversation.